election campaign turns nasty. John Prescott is involved in a violent clash with a protester in North Wales. Confrontation 2 for Tony Blair on the day he set out his vision for Labour's second term. The former royal aide Jane Andrews has been found guilty of murdering her boyfriend. And a treble triumph for Liverpool as they win a thrilling UEFA Cup final. This is BBC News 24. I'm Peter Dobby. Good evening. It was supposed to be a day dominated by Tony Blair's vision for Labour's second term in government, but it was overshadowed by quite extraordinary confrontations. In Mr Blair's case, it was a verbal lashing of the NHS. Then his deputy, John Prescott, was involved in a brief fight with a protester as he arrived to address a Labour rally at Rhyl in North Wales. Eggs were thrown, fists flew, and one man has been arrested. Pictures appeared to show that Mr Prescott threw the first punch.
John Prescott was heckled by farming, fuel and steelworks protesters from the minute he got off his campaign bus. And then, completely out of the blue, verbal assault turned to serious physical violence. Looking at the pictures again in slow motion, you can see the sequence of events unfold into a vicious scuffle. The Labour Party has issued a statement saying the Deputy Prime Minister was attacked and defended himself, as anybody would in these circumstances.
I support your cause. I've listened to you every time you wanted. What you've just done today, you've let yourself down badly. You've behaved like animals.
As far as the events at Rhyl were concerned, the guy shouldn't have thrown the egg, and the Deputy Prime Minister shouldn't have reacted in the way that he did. None of us is perfect, but both of them have to now be dealt with by the law in the usual way.
Finally, this formal statement from Mr Prescott himself.
I got off my bus into clearly a hostile crowd. I walked through all the jostling and I was attacked by an individual. In the melee that followed, I clearly defended myself. I believe someone is now being questioned by the police, and it would be quite improper for me and quite wrong to add any further comment.
What should have been a positive day for Labour has entirely departed from script. Intended to be about political vision, it may end up with criminal charges instead. Philippa Thomas, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Labour's best laid plans had come unstuck when Tony Blair was berated over his health policies by an angry woman at a hospital in Birmingham. And the Home Secretary was heckled and jeered by the Police Federation. All of it took the spotlight off the manifesto itself, unveiled by Mr Blair with his cabinet at Birmingham's conference centre.
New Labour's big day out, an immaculately prepared manifesto launch in Birmingham, featuring more money for health. And the Prime Minister visits the city's Queen Elizabeth Hospital. 4 years on, he's no vanity in achievement. He says, "We reject the quiet life." Lucky that, because he's about to hear those lethal words. Can I ask you a question, please?
I'd like to know what your Labour government are going to do. My partner has cancer.
He's got lymphatic cancer. They've had a hellish time, and Sharon Storer is at boiling point.
He couldn't get a bed on his own ward, which is the bone marrow transplant unit, and he had a terrible evening. We've had a very distressful 24 hours. So what are you going to do? The staff is absolutely incredible on the ward. They can't do enough for the patients, and then he has to be referred down to an A&E unit, which was absolutely diabolical.
Sorry about the situation.
No, you're not very sorry, because if you was, you would do something about it. They're understaffed, they've got terrible facilities, the toilets are appalling, and you're just not giving them the money to make the facilities better for them. You're not, you are definitely not. All you do is walk around and make yourself known, but you don't actually do anything to help anybody.
What I'm visiting here now is the extra investment we're putting in, not just into cancer services, but into heart service as well. Now, I know it takes some time. Of course it takes time to get the staff that we need.
He has had an absolute horrendous 4 hours, and it has made him far worse. So what are you going to do about that? Yes, you're going to do something, can't you? But you're not, because you won't.
If I can just explain to you what I'm doing.
Okay.
He'd had more chance to explain what he was going to do earlier at the manifesto launch. There, the cabinet, a silent backdrop, had heard a frank admission that people are frustrated by the slow speed of change so far.
We know how much there still needs to be done. We understand that for a pensioner still waiting for an operation, or the family who's just been burgled, or the mother worried about the quality of her child's school. Change simply cannot come fast enough.
A lot has improved, he insisted, but everyone knows the big investments haven't yet arrived. Mr. Blair's core message was that when they do, so will tough reforms, using any means necessary to improve services. Private managers in the NHS, a big upheaval in comprehensive schools, ideas disliked by Labour traditionalists.
Money alone is not enough. That is why we are also committed to fundamental reform in public services. There should be no barriers, no dogma, no vested interest that stand in the way of delivering the very best services for our people.
This was a manifesto of a hyperactive government still hungry for power. But Tony Blair's repeated message in recent days is to emphasise that he knows, like the rest of the country, that he hasn't transformed things yet.
As long as there is one child in poverty, one pensioner in poverty, one person denied their chance in life, this is one Prime Minister and one party who will have no rest, no vanity in achievement, no sense of mission completed, until those people are given the hope they deserve.
But all the careful presentation of that message was knocked aside by the unexpected and the unplanned. Labour's Millbank headquarters had intended today to be entirely different. A day when we focused on the detail of a meaty manifesto. But election campaigns are about confrontations on the street and scuffles and arguments as much as about detailed paragraphs and spending plans. General election campaigns would be much smoother and easier to organise if it wasn't for members of the public. Andrew Marr, BBC News, outside Labour's Millbank headquarters.
Joining us now, our political correspondent, Philippa Thomas. Philippa, the Labour Party must have wanted the manifesto on the front pages tomorrow, but a raw egg and John Prescott's put paid to that.
It has rather. As Andy was saying, this is what Labour wanted you to see. The manifesto, ambitions for Britain. The planning that went into this manifesto was immense. And of course, it all came to nothing because instead we have, for example, The Sun, two jabs Prescott there, and the Daily Mail has it again. The two Jags floor show, and I could show you all the papers. Prescott punches a protester, says The Telegraph. Angry voters spoil Labour's big day, says The Independent, and that wobbly Wednesday again. And The Guardian, the Prescott punch-up. The visit to the seaside turns rather ugly. So massive full-colour pictures of John Prescott on the floor after a violent scuffle instead of a beaming visionary Tony Blair.
And tomorrow one can imagine the Conservatives saying, well, hang on, here we have a government who want to end the yob culture, and yet the Deputy Prime Minister takes a swing at someone.
Well, of course, it depends on how you see these pictures. Was he acting in legitimate self-defence because the egg thrown at him hit him so hard it felt like a punch in the face? That's what Labour's saying to us behind the scenes. Or was it loutish behaviour? Did he just instinctively lash out as soon as somebody went for him? It's really a matter of interpretation from these pictures, but it doesn't look good. It's extremely embarrassing for Labour tonight.
Now, let's move on to another aspect of the election story, Philippa. The Financial Times, in its first edition, is apparently saying that they have got Oliver Letwin admitting that he was the source, the anonymous source, previously anonymous source, saying we will cut tax by £20 billion.
That's right, and there's been an instant reaction from Labour there saying this completely blows apart the Conservatives' credibility because we have it on the record now that whereas they're telling the public they want £8 billion worth of tax cuts, in fact they're talking about £20 billion. That's got to mean slashing public services. However, I think it's really hard to outdo the impact of the Prescott scuffle and what happened to Tony Blair yesterday. So I don't think this is going to be top of the news agenda, but it is something that Labour will push at, saying that the Conservatives are basically all over the place when it comes to their tax and spending plans.
Just going back briefly, Philippa, to that very stage-managed launch of the manifesto today, is it your sense tonight that the Labour Party tomorrow will try to rise above the events of this earlier today because they don't have any other choice?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're already saying, as far as the Prescott incident is concerned, well, a man has been arrested, he's been taken in for questioning. Obviously, it's a matter for the police now. This cannot be political. They're trying to be terribly proper about it and put it neatly to one side and say, let's get on with the real business, which is giving the voters what they want. Of course, what you could say about both the Prescott and Blair incidents today is that in some way both show that there are angry members of the public, whether it's over health, whether it happens to be over the countryside or farming or other fuel protests, that there is public anger that's coming through and that has obviously taken ministers by surprise. So really should have been Labour's big splashy day, the most positive day you could have for Labour, and it's completely thrown them back on the defensive.
Now, when you talk about Tony Blair's day, Philippa, when you talk about anger and that incident today, is it your feeling that that woman heckling Tony Blair outside, well, giving her a hard time outside the Birmingham hospital, will be one of the images of the election campaign that people really remember?
Oh, I think so. It's hard to see how things could become more spontaneous than this. I mean, when we first saw all those pictures coming in, when we first saw the dialogue, you know, everybody I know in Westminster today just stopped and was transfixed. You do not have such raw drama unfolding in today's politics. It is usually stage managed. Labour, of course, is trying to turn this to their advantage in a way, saying, well, she was talking about public services. That's exactly what Tony Blair is saying he's talking about. He wants to improve things. It's our agenda, not the Tories' agenda. But it is difficult to get away from the point of view that this has been a very negative day for the Prime Minister and his team.
Philippa, thanks a lot. Well, William Hague has said that Tony Blair is asking for a second chance after failing to deliver on any of his party promises. He told supporters at a rally in Warwickshire that the Conservatives could win the election.
William Hague lost no time in capitalising on the Prime Minister's hospital confrontation. Talking to Conservative Party workers near Coventry tonight, he said it showed how Labour had failed to deliver.
And as Tony Blair discovered in Birmingham today, careful choreography and planted questions cannot shield him from the anger of ordinary voters. The people I meet, people who've been let down, people who now know better than to fall for his meaningless promises and stealth taxes all over again.
Why don't you dump the racists from the Tory
Earlier, the Tory leader had run into a spot of bother himself. His walkabout in Wolverhampton was interrupted by hecklers. Instead of the scheduled 20 minutes, the visit lasted only 3, though party workers deny it was cut short. At least the Tories are allowing impressionist Rory Bremner to join their battle bus. Labour have banned him from theirs. He's been brushing up his impersonation of Mr Hague.
Well, I think I will be very strongly advising people. I'll be saying that after the next election I will be lowering the price of fuel. But that's fine, because after the next election I'll be working in a petrol station.
The Liberal Democrat leader was visiting hospitals in Somerset and Rochdale today, encouraged by an opinion poll showing an increase in his party's support. He says it's pledged to boost health service spending by increasing the top rate of income tax for high earners was the honest approach.
And that's why we've been quite straight with people, saying we do want to invest more in the health service. It will cost a price, but with us, you know the price and you know the money will be raised fairly.
It's been a day when the sparks have truly been flying between politicians and voters, and a day that could be remembered as the one this election came alive over an issue that's so far dominating the campaign, the state of our public services and how we pay for them. John Andrew, BBC News, Westminster.
Some other news now. A former aide to the Duchess of York has been jailed.